So just a sneak peek before we start the video, stamina is still stronger this patch, sadly. We're going to go through and look at why that is, so do stay tuned. Hey, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now if you are returning here or new to the channel, lots of people know that I am kind of a bit of a number person. I love making my builds min-max down to the T, be as strong as they possibly can be, and we're going to do that once more, where we're going to break down every class this time, looking at the good, the bad and the ugly, so that way you know exactly what to pick for PvP for your desired role. And don't worry, we will cover Magicka and Stamina and look at other versions as well. If you haven't guessed it already, I've updated the charts for the Harrowstorm patch once more, I've added a few new tweaks, and like I did last time, they've been reviewed by a number of PvP players who play multiple classes like myself, people like zDan, Is There No One Else, loads of people from his Discord, so many YouTubers. So all in all, these give you a really clear and transparent view of kind of what is your class actually good at, actually bad at, and how can you play to its strengths, so that way you've got an advantage in PvP. And if you haven't guessed it, this channel is all about helping you get better with next level builds, guides and gameplay. So why not start improving today by subscribing and turn on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's jump straight in. So you're probably asking yourself now, how would you even kind of evaluate the classes, judge them, rank them, how do you keep it fair? And that's a very good question. Like I did last patch, I created a unique 12-point ranking system, where there's 12 areas that you can kind of look at the build and go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of, yeah, that's what it looks like. It's got good single target damage, it's got good mobility, sustain, self-heals, so on and so on. I then use that for every single class, the same categories, and I use the same scaling system too. So it's 0 to 20. Rather than going 1 to 10, 0 to 20 just gives you a better kind of indication of the discrepancies, the differences between the classes. This really allows us to see what is each class good and bad at. So you can compare Magicka to Magicka, going, oh, I'm a Magicka Dragonknight. Is it good this patch, or should I maybe change to a Templar? Is that better? But you can also compare Stamina to Magicka as well, and go, oh, I'm on a Stamina NightBlade, and should I be playing that, or should I be playing a Magicka Sorcerer perhaps? What would be better competitively? And that's what these charts are really good at. And if you aren't kind of in it to min-max it, in it to win it, you could go, oh, I'm playing a Magicka NightBlade and I don't really know what I should do building wise. What should I build into? Should I build into single target damage, or should I bring it to AoE damage or sustain? What do I need to kind of factor in when creating my next build? And that's what these charts are designed to do, to give you a really good idea of what is your class good at, so you can play to its strengths and not its weaknesses. And to further help you, I've added in a ranking system this time, where you get a ranking from 1 to 5, 1 being absolutely dreadful, 5 being this is like god tier, this is like the best you can get. So it's kind of like F to S plus, kind of, if you think of a numerical or letter ranking. So let's look at some examples now, kind of go through how does it work quickly, and then jump straight into the charts. So we're going to quickly look at the examples just to show you kind of how do the charts actually work, and more importantly, how do I come up with that ranking at the bottom left. In this example, duels or solo serial, you have like 5 out of 5. Duels are really good if you have this kind of sort of dynamic setup on your class. And same for battleground solo and sort of serial solo, that kind of one sort of by yourself play. Why is that? And well, actually, if you kind of look at solo play, whether it's duels, battlegrounds, serial, these are the things that are really important. You need to have burst, whether that's single target or AoE. Being able to one-shot somebody, which is burst, means that you will have so much more success in PvP. You'll notice I also put the word potential, which means that you can't always get it reliably, so things like NightBlades do struggle somewhat, but they do have the potential that if you land the combo, you one-shot somebody. So that's why it's kind of potential rather than just actual burst. But most classes can access the burst potential pretty reliably, apart from NightBlade, it's a bit clunky. You then need things like defense to be able to kind of take the hits, because you're going to be hit by 3 or 4 people at least, 5 or 6 if you're in serial, maybe up to 20 if you're in like large serial. So you're going to get hit a lot, and you need to be able to kind of take the beating or you're going to die. Same for sustain. If you run out of resource when you're fighting outnumbered, you are dead. And mobility is kind of king here. The faster you are in PvP, the easier it is to 1vx to fight outnumbered, because you can move around, line of sight, kite, and that just means you avoid so much more damage. Rather than being hit by 6 or 7 people at once, move around a rock, you might reduce it to 2 or 3. That's like a 200% damage reduction. It's huge. And that's same for self-heals as well, that if you can't heal yourself, you are going to die. So those kind of things that are really essential for kind of 1vx or playing by yourself, single target burst or AoE burst, basically can you one-shot one person or loads of people. Defense, sustain and mobility, can you get around without dying and stay alive? And then self-heals obviously help kind of that kind of aspect as well. As for the group utility, group heal strength, class identity, that's irrelevant. It doesn't make any sense because you're playing by yourself. You don't need to worry about other people because you're trying to keep yourself alive. Things that are helpful but not essential are like single target damage, damage from dots and AoE damage. So single target damage from last time is basically how hard do your skills actually hit. So as you can see, it's quite high, that's Dizzy and Swing, that hits really hard. Damage from dots is good, but it's not essential because you can't always reliably count on their damage. And the same for AoE damage, it does less than single target damage, so they're not essential but they're just useful to have. So our second example chart out of 3 examples, you can skip ahead if you like. It's just looking at kind of battlegrounds group or small groups like less than 6 people in PvP. And as you can see the ranking this time, battleground solo, 3 out of 5 is not great, same for duels, but for groups and battlegrounds, really good build. For Cyrodiil, it's pretty good actually, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And then for like small groups, it's very, very good. And why is that? Well, for kind of playing in group play, whether it's kind of 2 or 3 people or 5 people, maybe 6 people at the most, for small groups, you need lots of yellow things. These are the essentials. Without them, your build will be pretty pants and you will die quickly. So the biggest thing you need in group play is really burst, and especially AoE burst, that kind of trumps everything else. If you can kill loads of people really fast, within, 3 seconds, you're going to find it much easier to stay alive as a group because you can kind of just ult dump and drop multiple people really fast. It's why Warden is really good for kind of AoE burst, whether it's Magicka or Stamina, because of Deep Fissure straight Subterranean Assault. You do that with an ultimate and people just melt. You also need lots of kind of AoE damage once more, be it to just fill up with just AoE spam, whether that's like Sap Essence or Pulsar for example. You also need a single target burst as well, because if you get caught by yourself and you can't one-shot somebody, or maybe do 50% of their health at once, you're going to die quick because you just don't have the damage to kind of survive one-on-one. And then this is also true for kind of like defense, sustain, mobility and utility, that you need kind of all of that stuff too, because that keeps you alive. Being able to stay alive and take a hit, be able to sustain so you don't run out of resources and move around quickly, stay as your unit. If you can't move with the same speed as everybody else in your team, you're going to die. You're going to be the one left by yourself, get caught out and you're like melted really, really quick. And then what's really helpful for kind of small groups where it starts to play more of an importance is that utility and the group heal. Being able to provide something that is useful to the team that isn't there already, like major vulnerability, major breach, major fracture, those things really help your team just add more damage, more defense. And that's also true for group heal strength too. Being able to obviously heal multiple people through skills and stuff is incredibly helpful. And as you know, a lot of this stuff could be changed with sets and so on, but do factor that in. So utility could be improved with transmutation, for example. Now our third and final example is looking at kind of medium and large groups. What do you need? And as you can see, it's kind of focusing more towards the sort of AoE damage, utility and so on, and that's why they got high rankings. As you can see, this has high AoE burst, high AoE damage, high sustain, high utility and high heal sort of strength for groups and so on. Those things are really important. Defense, mobility and self-heals have kind of come down loads drastically because they're not as good. You've got so many people healing you, they don't need to worry too much about healing yourself. You've got so many people healing you that even if you take a big hit, because you have so many heals coming on you, ideally, you're not going to die because you're just recovering too quick, so defense is not as important. And that's also true for mobility as well, that actually there's like 15-20 people, you only need to move as fast as the slowest person. If you move kind of as fast as everybody else, you're going to be fine, you're not going to get caught out by yourself. If you are like significantly faster than everybody else and you rush ahead, you will die. And that's also true if you're really slow. You get left by yourself, someone will snipe you, you're dead. So this is kind of what you need for large groups or medium groups. As I said, it's AoE damage and AoE burst, sustain, utility and group heal strength. And then the red stuff is just helpful but not essential. Now we're going to jump in and look at those classes and the charts for each class, talking about the good, the bad and the ugly, so that way you know exactly what to pick next time you make your next character. So Magicka Sorcerer, what is it really good at? And the big thing to take away is that Pet Sorcerer is so much better than non-Pet Sorcerer. It's got the same sort of damage because you've got Necropotence giving you just crazy max Magicka balls. You can then pair it with things like Bright Throw, Armor Master, you name it, it's just stupidly strong. You then obviously get really big heals because of the Twilight, you've got good utility because you can heal other people, you've got access to obviously negate, so that's why group utility changes somewhat, because being able to obviously negate and heal people and stuff as a Pet Sorc is just a bit easier than a non-Pet Sorc. Now looking at Stamina Sorcerer as a class, which is questionable, the class identity is really low, it's basically just loads of weapon skills, but it's actually not a bad class. It's got really high mobility, it's one of the fastest classes in PvP. It's also got really high single target burst potential because of the amplitude passive. Basically the more health your target has, the more damage you do, which means you can do really like nasty burst combos from point blank. with things like Onslaught, Dizzying Swing, you can one-shot people if you land it correctly. So it's really good for kind of just single target burst. And it's got pretty good defense because it heals as it does damage, and that's why the self-heal is really high. That means that this class is really good in kind of duels and solo play. It's not the best, but it's not bad. Our next class is Magicka Templar, and this is a great class. It's kind of like a jack of all trades and master of all as well. It's just really, really good. It's got great burst, single target, can one-shot people basically with a combo. It's got good identity, it's got good group heal and self-heal strength. It's got group utility with purge and some really good sort of just buffs and debuffs for teams and enemies and so on. It's got great defense, it's really tanky, hard to kill. It's got good AoE damage built in. All in all, it's just a really good class, and the sustain is high. Looking at Stamina Templar, this is kind of the same sort of theme as Magicka Templar in all honesty. It's just really good across the board. Christopher ESO absolutely loves it because it's such a strong class. It's got really high burst, it's got really high kind of single target and AoE burst, AoE damage, it's got sustain, it's got self-heal, it's absolutely crazy. This is true for PvE as well, with like 80k DPS with one skill. It's just stupidly overtuned in all honesty, which means it's just great in duels and battleground solo because it can just one-shot people stupidly hard with burning light, biting jabs. In small groups it's not bad because it's got purge, as I've said, but the larger the group the less effective they get because they're a melee fighting class, so just factor that in. Now our next class is Magicka Dragonknight, and this is a really kind of unique class in that it's really clear what you're playing, the identity is really high. It's got really good kind of dot damage if you build towards it with things like the new set, so Drago's Unrest, but it's very clunky and it's not the best class overall. For things in duels where it's a one-on-one, they're really good because they've got great control over the targets, and they've got kind of good just sustained damage, and so that's really good against anybody without purge. For battlegrounds, they get a bit less and less effective. For solo serial, they're pretty there's better classes in all honesty, and the more groups you add, the kind of less useful they get. The big saving grace in group play is that they have chains, so they can just pull people in and sort of talons them. They have a few synergies which is somewhat useful, which is why the group utility is higher. If you wanted to look at like two extremes on the same class, it's Magicka and Stamina in this case. Dragonknight for Stamina is just so much better in all honesty. It's got just better AoE burst, single target burst, better defense, it's got executes from weapon skills, it's got the same self-healing, it's got really good utility. All in all, it's just so much better than Magicka in this case. It's really good in duels, battlegrounds, solo serial, small serial, and even in large groups it's not bad because it's got synergies. It's got like the chain pull spam which you can do, it's got leap, it's got Dragonknight standard. So all in all, they're just a really good class if you want to jump into PvP. As for Magicka NightBlade, there are two specs in this case. So you've got like the normal NightBlade and the bomber, they're like there's two different playstyles. So for the normal NightBlade, they're really good in duels actually. They've kind of got like good burst if you can line it up. It's clunky, but if you line up, they're really good. And they have good defensive damage mitigation percentages. They've got good mobility because they can cloak and teleport around. They got okay self-healing, but it's not great, but it's okay. They got okay AoE damage. But the bomber though is very different. So the bomber is really, really like bad in duels. Like you can one-shot people normally, but people know you're going to do it, so they just block and you lost your damage. They're bad in sort of battlegrounds by yourself, but if you're in a group in battlegrounds and you coordinate with a bomber, they can be much better, but they're still 2 out of 5. For solo serial, however, they are really, really fun to play and really effective. You can literally go to a resource or go to kind of a keep battle and just go in and drop 10-15 people at once. It's absolutely crazy. They're again good in small group as well because again you've got that AoE burst if you need it, and again in medium groups too, and in large groups they're okay. The problem is though that you sacrifice so much defense for obviously offensive capability to be able to one-shot loads of people. It means you're very squishy, so they can be a bit difficult to play. So Stamina NightBlade is really kind of an interesting class. It's really good by itself, like it's a solo maybe duo class by itself. It'll in 2 or 3 people at the most, but the more people you add, the less and less they get. They have no utility whatsoever. They've got no off heals. They're a bit but for a solo player, they're really good because they've got good burst if you land it. They've got really good mobility, really good defense and sustain. They've obviously got good single target damage because their spammable hits really, really hard. So all in all, they're really good for kind of by yourself or in pairs, maybe 3 at the very most, but that's about it. Now looking at our first DLC kind of class, that's Warden. We're going to focus on the Magicka version once more, and the Magicka Warden is really kind of a unique class. It's very clear what you're playing. It's got really good AoE burst potential and AoE damage. The whole kit's built around AoE damage. It's a really bulky class in all honesty. It's got great self-heals. It heals as it takes damage because of Living Trellis. It gets resources as it takes damage because of Nature's Gift. It heals when it does damage because of their Animal Companion passives, and really, really good as a class. And what's more, they're like the best classes for just group play. They have so much utility. AoE buffs, AoE major protection, AoE heals, single target heals. They give resources. It's just absolutely crazy what they can do. So hands down, Magicka Warden is like the best support DPS class you can get, or the best kind of tanky healer thing you can get. For a solo player though, they're a bit They're not bad in duels, you can make them work, but the damage is just too slow, it's not quick enough. So again, they're a bit Looking at the stamina version of Warden, and what you'll see instantly is that it's just better overall. It's got basically all the weaknesses Magicka Warden has, it just fixes with the weapon skills. So it means that it's really good in duels and solo play because it can basically one-shot people. If you go with the dual version, you can basically one-shot large groups with like Subterranean Assault, Whirling Blades, Dawnbreaker. It's just absolutely crazy. So all in all, it's like a better version of the Magicka Warden. It's just got more damage. It can actually kill people quickly, and that's why I think it's just a stronger version overall. As for Magicka Necromancer, our next DLC class, it's got really good single target burst if you can land it. If you can get Blast Bones with Meteor to land together, crazy damage, but it's really hard to line it up. So the potential's there, it's just really hard to get it. That's also true for the AoE version as well. The Harmony version of Necromancer is really good in all honesty. The problem is though that it's just hard to line up when you're kind of fighting one-on-one or in small groups because people move out of it, they're not stupid. And so it can be a bit but if you land it, by God does it hit hard. So all in all, I think Necromancer is kind of like a supportive role as a Magicka build. It's got kind of a bit of everything. It's not great, it doesn't have an execute, it's got kind of like a weird passive. The only big thing it brings is the AoE major vulnerability, which is like a huge buff to kind of just group play. Being able to give that to your team just means that it's significantly better than many other classes. And they're also really tanky as well as a class, one of the tankiest classes you can get in PvP. The problem is though, as I said, the damage is just not reliable. It's a bit underwhelming as you play it, so that's my take on it. Our final class is Stamina Necromancer, which just has absolutely everything. AoE Defile, AoE Vulnerability, heals for you, heals for your team, great sustain, stupidly tanky. There's not really much it can't do, and that's the problem. Most classes you need to give up on something or have a weakness in an area, but Necromancer just doesn't. It's really, really good. The only kind of part is maybe this group heal strength, but for a stamina character that's still pretty decent with Mortal Coil, Little Spirit Guardian, it's not bad. So all in all, for me, Stamina Necromancer is just best kind of across the board because of the AoE buffs it gives, the kind of tankiness, the burst it has. It's just really, really strong. So for me, that's kind of where I see the classes so far this patch. As I've said, they've been reviewed by zDan. Is there no one else? About 50 people on his Discord, so they've been reviewed by loads and loads of PvP players to give you a really kind of clear and objective view on what is each class good and bad at. So what can we take away from these charts? Like, why is Stamina so much better than Magicka? And well, there's a few reasons which I'm not going to go through in this video, but I'm just going to highlight some of them, and I'll do another video following up on this to kind of just explore them really in much more detail on why there is an issue. But the things for me is like the mobility, the lack of an execute on most classes, the single target stamina are just, they don't hit hard enough. A lot of the Magicka skills just cost way too much Magicka than they should do. They're actually more expensive than stamina skills, even though they're the same morph or the same version. So there's just loads of small things that if you like add them in isolation, they're not bad, but when you add them up quickly and you kind of combine them, it becomes more and more apparent that stamina is so much better. They can heal because the weapon damage passive and medium is better than the light armor penetration passive. They've got cheaper skills because stamina skills cost less. Their stamina skills hit significantly harder than Magicka skills. Magicka skills have a delay of 450 millisecond if it's a projectile. Those kind of things which, again, seem small in isolation, but when you add them up, you just don't have the same sort of competitiveness that you do as a stamina build. And that's coming from somebody who plays all classes in this game, Magicka and stamina alike, and from speaking to people like zDan, Is There No One Else, loads of people in the Discord. So in all honesty, they do need to be some tweaks and some reworks, and I will put a video up kind of just going through those and what I would do to try and make it better in all honesty. But the video is long enough as it is, and I do want to say obviously thanks for watching, staying around this long, and a big thank you to all our Patreons. I really appreciate their support. Obviously they help with the website, which if you're unaware, I've been obviously making good progress with it. I've been put into like an exclusive beta, so that'll be coming out very soon. And yeah, I just want to say a big thanks to all you guys for obviously supporting the channel. Nearly hit 4,000 subscribers. And with that said guys, I will catch you in the next one. So take care, thanks for watching, bye!